what the docuseries is about.
So it just got banned on YouTube. The other day, my dad's friend told me a joke that serves as the perfect analogy.
It goes something like, watching people argue over any of these issues is like watching two drunk dudes argue over their bar tab on the Titanic.
It's not that those conversations don't matter or aren't relevant, but we are headed for a giant ice. We kind of need to handle that first before we have the luxury of having these other arguments. It's very much a series on agency. People often struggle to understand what I mean by agency. Whoever's steering the ship has agency. Okay, I think it's important that we somehow come to realize that we are on the same team. By that I mean the team that doesn't want to go extinct. If that's what you're rooting for, then not you. But everybody else that wants to continue to exist in the future, we're on the same team.
There was an infamous study out of MIT from 1972 studying the risk of societal collapse, attempting to predict when that might occur. And in the most infamous scenario, societal collapse began around 2040.
For those of you that don't like to do math, that is in 15 years.
Over time, that study is held up, and in recent years, multiple researchers from places like Harvard have found that we are right on track for two of the worst-case scenarios. Meaning, if we continue to do things the way we're doing them, we are risking societal collapse, a sharp downturn in
15 years.
The Titanic struck the iceberg just 36 seconds after it was spotted by the lookouts. Maybe that is reflective of our current situation.
We can see the icebergs. There's not one, there's many. But for some reason, we can't talk about them.
Not a single candidate is talking about COVID origins, which we could have investigated fully like a sane society, reverse engineered, and saved a bunch of people before millions died. Not something free people tolerate. Not a single candidate is talking about vaccines. Not a single candidate is talking about how the Fed printed trillions of dollars and transferred them to billionaires. Twice. Not a single candidate is talking about aerosol injections. Not a single candidate is talking about how the government let pharma sell AIDS-infected blood to kids. Not a single candidate is talking about the billions of IQ points we lost by putting fluoride in our water. Not a single candidate is talking about how the intelligence agencies regularly violate our civil liberties. Not a single candidate is talking about the geomagnetic excursion underway. Not a single candidate is talking about letting billionaires try to block out the sun. Not a single candidate is talking about the reality of what took place in North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. Not a single candidate is talking about holding Israel responsible for the attack on the USS Liberty. Not a single candidate talking about the AMOC. Not a single candidate talking about the embarrassing pile of research linking non-native EMF to cancer and diabetes. Resource depletion, government-facilitated wealth transfers, negative externalities. Any of these things that are actually threatening our...
If we really think that any of them are going to save us, they're not. Until we can learn to have that conversation in a dialectic way and seek to synthesize the best information on both sides to move toward the truth, nothing changes. We have to figure out how to talk about them. People at scale are starting to realize that the future we know is possible isn't going to come for free. We're going to have to work for it. I mean, an evolution in consciousness.
We are not going to be able to elect our way into it, or legislate our way into it, or argue our way into it.
Most of us know our government's corrupt, and it's not even necessarily anything nefarious. It's simply market capture.
When we fail to hold our government to account, it becomes captured by the market.
It's less an individual conversation of
should I stop paying my taxes,
and more a collective conversation of how do we stop this? How do we stop this thing that we've created? How do we steer clear of these icebergs when we don't have control of the wheel? And yes, this is something we have to do. We can either do it now or we can wait till we hit the iceberg.
We don't have a lot of data on that, but we do have a few data points, and
doesn't look like the best strategy. But instead of framing it that way, this is something we get to do. There is some truth to living in a free country. Dumping a bunch of tea in the harbor may not seem like a big deal now, but back then it was a major act of rebellion. That radical act transformed the entire power landscape. It changed the trajectory of a country. Moving back into the science realm, we have a few decades of research studying the people steering the ship, and that research is a conversation begging to take place. Are these the people that we want to trust to steer the ship? What has become quite clear is we don't know where they're going. Are they intentionally steering us into the icebergs, or are they unaware of the danger in our path due to their inability to seek and take perspective? Does it matter? Agency is the opposite of victimhood. The victims are down in the bar arguing over the bar tab. The agents are steering the ship.
This chart here is from the main study that validated the MIT study. The dotted line here represents what MIT predicted in 1972, and the solid line is what has actually occurred. You can see that we are tracking on every single metric.
Uh-oh.
And we are here.
It doesn't look so good after that. And you can see here there is no metric for idiots steering the ship.
Published in the Yale Journal of Industrial Ecology, current business as usual trajectory of global civilization is heading towards the terminal decline of economic growth within the coming decade. Some of the people reviewing this that know a lot more than I do think that we're actually ahead of schedule.
How old will your kids be in 2040?
This here is from a different study. Industrial civilization is likely to deplete its low-cost mineral resources within the next century,
With debilitating impacts
for the global economy and key infrastructure within the coming decade. There was a stabilized world scenario, but that is the one we are least closely tracking, and that window of opportunity is closing fast.
People want this message to be sexier, but like, how sexy can you make it? Let me try though. This is like the biggest opportunity for an agency grab that humanity has ever had. I don't know if I can think of anything sexier than that. That wasn't good. What I do know is that the stakes have never been higher. We are as polarized and divided as we have ever been. And the trillion-dollar propaganda machine dedicated to ensuring that division could not be happier about it. And this thing has never been more powerful.
This is not an iPhone. This is a $3 trillion military-grade lethal weapon aimed straight at your brainstem.
Dividing us into enemy factions.
Your most primal needs and impulses are being weaponized. This is done with invisible asymmetry of power. The bottom line is this: you are being fucking harvested
Into polarized false certainties, creating the illusion that we are participating in a game that we don't even have access to.
This is done with invisible asymmetry of power.
Certainty is an emotional state, not an intellectual state. Our brains crave certainty the same way they crave food and sex.
It's the same neural pathways. It makes us very easy to manipulate because it's very easy to weaponize.
None of us are immune to the propaganda machine. We are all captured by narrative warfare. But once we become aware of it, we wake up capabilities in our brains, like American Ultras, that process information consciously instead of just letting it in beneath our conscious awareness.
It's like an internal fact-checking mechanism that actually functions because it isn't funded by shitty people with an agenda. And beyond that, our brains reward us with oxytocin for talking shit about people that think differently than us, so the people on the other side, which makes us even easier to manipulate.
When we take the bait and project false certainties, it creates division. The propaganda machine is really good at this. It understands your brain better than you do. But to go from prey to predator, all you have to do is catch up.
But all hope is not lost.
When we embrace uncertainty, it invites union, which invites collective agency. Collective agency
Requires
seeking one another's perspectives so deeply that we can empathize, understand where they're coming from so that we no longer want to hurt them. We can't do this divided.
To anyone who is afraid to share this message or afraid to start this conversation, you're selling yourself short, trapped in a collective illusion, courtesy of
Narrative warfare. If you think the other side is bad or dumb, you have been captured by some level of narrative warfare, and I get that that is really hard to digest, but I promise you, you can do it, and we can't do this without each other. And the government that we're funding that works for us is actively working against those things consistently, predictably, and reliably. Who is our loyalty to? I might not be the best video makist, but I'm a damn good underwriter, and this message may not be sexy on the surface, but it's sexy deep down. Agency is everything, and we're at an inflection point. Whether we continue to fund it should be an imminent conversation. But what's more important is that we learn to have these conversations without projecting certainty, which means understanding our brains.
No one is coming to save you.